Hello and good afternoon, everybody. It is 6 p.m. on June 26th, and welcome to Community and Health and Wellness Open Discussion Night. My name is Samantha Upshaw, and we also have Dr. Jamie Lee here as well with us. I am going to let you guys come on in and just start registering and popping in here. And while we're doing that, I'm actually going to close this screen down and I'm going to pop in a few poll questions because I never actually stated tonight what our webinar is on. And we're going to be looking at unlocking the power of protein. So we have done many webinars before, and I just want to let everyone know we're finally at the 1 year mark, just over the 1 year mark of doing our webinars. So welcome to, I think, webinar 12 or 13. So this protein webinar tonight is actually in the midst of our macro talk. So last webinar of last month, it may be live on our website. I'm not sure if I've got it out there yet, but you guys, if you're in our clinic here in our program, will already have access to it. And that was on fats. Tonight is protein. And next month, we're actually going to do a little talk on carbohydrates. So while I've done my yep, I am going to do what I said I was going to do and pop up some of our poll questions. So we're going to introduce them one at a time. If you can pop in there as you see it pop up on your screen and answer your best to your knowledge. So this first one is, what has the highest amount of protein per 100 grams? So we're talking about 100 grams of weight of protein sitting there on the scale. Which so such as meat or seeds or grains. I'm wondering if you're able to pop in there, which one do you feel is the highest protein amount? Beef, chicken, we've got pumpkin seeds, we've got quinoa, we've got tilapia, and we've got seitan as well. So I've already got someone responding in here. We've definitely picked an animal-based protein. It looks like they've picked out chicken.
Just to clarify, this is 100 grams of that product, not protein itself. Okay, so what in the 100 grams, which of the product has the most amount of protein? Yeah.
So as I said, we got chicken, we got plant-based, and I've actually put a little trickery in here. So I'm going to let some others respond back to it, and I will actually come back to that poll and give you that answer very soon. I want you to kind of sit and have a think. Now, I do have actually what I need to do first is end this poll here, and I'm going to open up our next poll. Which protein is best incorporated into the body? So this is a Dr. Lee question. He said to pop in there for me. We've got here answers of whey. We've got legume and beans. We have egg whites and whole eggs. So I don't know if Dr. Lee, if you want to help prompt them into this question a little bit to help them answer.
Yeah, so basically when we eat um, meat or any source of protein, it has to be digested and absorbed, and then it can be utilized in our body, right? So not every protein is equal, and not every source of food is equal in terms of the incorporation of protein into your body. Only the protein that gets incorporated to our body is going to be useful. The rest of the protein that doesn't get incorporated gets utilized as something else, which we'll talk about down the road in our webinar.
Now, wonderful. We've got some responses in there, Dr. Lee. I don't know if we're going to be coming back to this specific question that we put out in the polls, if you want to answer it now or a little bit later. What is your
I can answer down later, and just prompt me in the right section if I can.
Absolutely.
I
We
can always
will
tell at the end. Yeah.
we'll do another prompt and as we get going. So we're gonna have a look. I've got two more to go here. Okay. We're gonna have a look at now which meat has the highest protein to fat ratio. So now we're thinking we've got options of beef, we have chicken, we have fish, pork, lamb, or rabbit. So our
So
response.
let's say you pick the leanest of all the cuts, okay, and you can pick of the leanest beef, leanest chicken, because obviously there's different qualities of meat. Leanest beef, leanest chicken, leanest fish, leanest pork, leanest lamb, leanest rabbit. Which one has the highest protein to fat ratio?
Excellent. So we've got some responses in here in beef and a few others as we get going. this one here. I think Dr. Lee, when he was telling me, he was quite pleased with what the answer is, and we'll share that with you as we
Really
get
funny,
going.
yeah.
So I'm going to close this poll down. Thanks, guys, for answering that one as well. And here is another. So what do you feel is the most essential macronutrient for life? Now, you have the option of this one. It could be a single choice if that's what you feel it is, multiple choice. But please click the ones that you feel is best. We've got fats, carbohydrates, and protein.
It's not is the most which macronutrients are essential for life?
Yes,
Essential for life.
essential. I may not have said that. I was reading it there. My apologies. So which one do you feel is the most essential macronutrient for life? Fats, carbohydrates, or proteins? So that one,
I mean, it could be more than one. It could be three. It could be zero.
yeah.
Obviously, it won't be zero. But
And I really love these questions because, as these answers coming in, we're really getting to see what our community knows. And we're here for your transfer of knowledge to help you actually get on that right track, coming from professionals within the field of obesity management itself. And Dr. Lee and I have helped ourselves in education and learning around nutrition and things like that to help you as well. And we do have a response in here. Are we answering this one throughout as well, Dr. Lee?
let's answer it now. I think it's
Okay,
very
so
important because
you know what? We have actually had an individual in here pick a carbohydrate section, and I'm wondering if you can share your knowledge there, Dr. Lee.
Yeah, so these are the macronutrients that we know typically when we read labels and stuff like that. And so of those three, only two of them are actually essential for life, and meaning that if you don't have it, you eventually will succumb to illnesses and of course succumb to disease and pass away. So those essential nutrients are actually fat and protein. Carbohydrate is not essential. The reason for that is that there's a metabolic pathway, a process called gluconeogenesis. And what that is that our body will make glucose for us. And so our brain predominantly likes glucose, but over time it can actually learn to adapt to use ketones, which is the breakdown of fat. And so the other sources of glucose, aside from what we eat, right, come from the body's own manufacturing of glucose. So they convert fat and protein into glucose. And that's why when you eat high protein diets, you can actually blunt some of your ketosis process because the protein will be converted to glucose. Now, there is a saturation, a threshold of how much the body can produce as a manufacturing plant. And beyond that, it becomes more toxic to the body, right? And so carbohydrates is actually not essential. That's why a lot of people can do higher protein / fat diet for months and months and months.
Excellent explanation there. So I'm going to close that poll down, and there is just one. I promise, just one more. And this one is how much, let me just read this first. I didn't write this in properly, guys, but how confident are you with fats? I think this may be our old question. Actually, close that down. This was a poll from one of our older ones, so I actually got rid of that.
Question. Yeah,
it was from our fat section, but in the end, it gets talked about today anyway.
Well, we can always say like, how comcomfortable are you with proteins, right? Like
proteins itself.
Well, when you think about the macronutrients, though, Sam, protein is probably the most popular macronutrient. From bodybuilders, everybody's drinking protein shakes and all those things. So you should understand where your basically what the purpose of the protein you're doing, how much you need, where it's come from, the source, all that stuff, man. Because we go to a nice restaurant, we want a nice piece of protein, right? Piece of meat, right? And so hopefully by the end, you guys will understand. It's not just about, not every protein is equal. The source of protein is extremely important to as well. And there's a few other things. So hopefully by the end, that'll be more clear.
Excellent. So thank you for answering those poll questions because they actually help us prompt where we have to pay a little bit more attention to as well, whether in our clinic or in this webinar as we get going. Now, I'm just going to share a slide with you just of our beginner when it comes down to just a quick brief overview on the benefits of protein in here. So let me just share this along. So today we're going to, obviously it's a protein talk today, but ensuring the adequate protein intake is very crucial. As we've mentioned there, between fats and protein are essential for our bodies itself. But protein is helping support bodily functions, enhancing physical performance and recovery. So they're the main things that most individuals will think about of why they're prompting their protein needs. But it's also very essential for tissue building and repair, which is very popular. Enzymatic functions, we've got hormonal regulation, immune support, we've got transport and storage, energy source, satiety and weight management. So there's quite a plethora of things that protein helps us with, and there's many more. I've only got one page and an hour to try to chat as we get going through. But ensuring that you've got the adequate, sorry, not inadequate, we want adequate amount of protein intake for our vital and optimal and well-being and our health as we get going. So a lot of us do have a preference of a protein, and we will talk a little bit today also in regards to when we're thinking about animal protein and plant-based protein. One of my questions to you guys was, the higher resource of proteins available, and that will still come. That one's coming up, and I'll give you that answer as we get going. But I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Lee. He's got a few things to go over about understanding protein and a little bit more information. And we'll be back and forth with some slides and education as we go through. But please, if there's any questions, down in the chat section, you can send us a message there and prompt us, and we will get back to that message and answer it as we go along. So off to you, Dr. Lee.
I'm gonna just share some slides here, guys. And so unlocking the power protein here. Let's go on. So we're just gonna talk a bit about protein, what it is, why do we need it, sources of our protein, and what is an essential amino acid versus non-essential amino acids. And really that's more for patients who or clients who eat who are vegetarians or vegans and stuff like that, right? And so basically what is a protein in general. And so a protein basically is a structure, is what we call a molecule structure, and the base components of that is amino acids. And so you have heard of anybody who drinks kind of maybe protein shakes that might have branched chain amino acids and stuff like that. And so basically those amino acids, based on the sequence and the way they are folded, creates a protein, right? And so that's basically what proteins are. And so, proteins are essential for life, as we did in a poll question, as opposed to carbohydrates and fats is also essential. And so really, if you look at what fat does, fats, it's integral to every single cell in our body, right? And including in the layers of the cell. Basically, the way to best think about it is essentially a soap bubble. Okay, that bubble dome is basically the phospholipid layer, and inside that there's cholesterol that makes it very, very fluid. Everything else inside that structure of the cell has protein in it, right? And so every structure, every organelle in the cell has protein. And protein is so important that it's involved in communications with different transport proteins. It's part of integral of a structure. So as Sam was saying, so our bones and stuff like that too as well. It's involved in, like, hemoglobin is a protein that carries the oxygen in our blood too as well. We also produce protein in the liver called albumin too as well. So albumin keeps the tissue sort of keeps the fluid in our blood vessels. And you have ever see patients who have like very swollen legs, and you push on it and there's like a little dimple. That's called pitting edema. And what has happened is those individuals often they lose actually a protein called albumin, right? And often when you get older, you tend to have more of this problem because our protein intake decreases, overall our calorie intake decreases as well as we get older. And so we lose what we call oncotic pressure. And you think about globulins and that as well. So it's part of our immune system additionally too as well. And so the immunoglobulins that we have, the IgA, E, M, these type of, and IgG, they are part of our immune system, right? So that they become very important too as well.
So when
All
we
the
start to think
hormones,
about
yeah.
when we start to think about protein, we don't just think about muscles.
We don't like it's a structure, right? It's the easiest for us to think about. But when it comes to kind of metabolism, biochemistry, it's extremely important as a source of protein. Basically they're building blocks for everything too as well, right? So all the enzymes that we use, every chemical process require one or multiple enzymes to carry out that chemical process. So these proteins are involved in that too as well, right? And so those are kind of the major functions of protein. In terms of sources of protein, as Sam alluded to, we commonly think meat as a good source of protein, and it is a really good source of protein, obviously, right? And you can think evolution, the way our brains develop and everything. We think that partly is because the meat that we eat has helped us evolve more rapidly, and the reason for that is the absorption rate of protein in meat, and what I mean by that is that in order to utilize the protein, as I mentioned earlier, we actually have to break it down, digest it into small amino acids, and that goes into our small gut, small intestines, and that gets absorbed into our body. The easier that is absorbed, first of all, the easier it is breaking down, the easier that is absorbed through the system, the better we can incorporate it to our system too as well, right? And so you require all that to have a good source of protein, and so you can have the highest ratio of protein in a food product, but it doesn't mean you're gonna get all the protein. Having said that, though, if you have a high ratio and it's say 17%, which is usually plant-based foods, well, you can have a lot more overall protein, right? Versus someone that's 20% and with a less density in protein too as well. So those are kind of any meat will provide you with some form of protein. Remember, the macronutrient protein is not the only thing that is needed for optimal functions. You need vitamins, minerals, fiber, all these other things, good fats too as well, right? But we are talking mainly about protein. But a good quality food will give you a lot of nutrients in general. So think about quality of food too as well. Other sources, so plant-based here, that Sam has mentioned, so beans, lentils. I'm a partially plant-based guy, so I love that. Nuts and seeds obviously are a big part. Soy products too as well are a good source. Although there are differences in respect to the sources of protein, and I really want to make this distinction here in terms of some of the products, right? So when we talk about where the food is coming from, so soy is a common staple for vegetarians, right? And I eat a bit of soy too as well, right? But the thing about soy is how it's made. Pretty much 99% or 100% of soy is GMO nowadays, right? And GMO is genetically modified organism. Basically, they've gone in and used some form of biochemical technology and changed the DNA structure of the of the food product, the soy product. And so they do that to protect from like pests and stuff like that, to make it live longer, etc. Those type of things. But we know that GMO foods have a lot of issues with the body, a lot of rejections and allergies too as well, right? So that's one of the problems with soy products. Another thing with soy products is the phytoestrogens that can occur. And phytoestrogens basically means that these molecules can mimic estrogen, so they can bind to receptors in estrogen and activate it or deactivate it depending on where it's binding to and which part it is. And so there's a theoretical risk of like if you have a history of breast cancer, it's something you probably want to avoid, right? Or family history, you might want to avoid something like that too as well. So you do have to eat quite a lot to worry about the phytoestrogen effect. But you know what, if you have a choice and you have a choice not to put yourself at risk, why would you? And other thing is there may be better sources of protein out there too as well, right? So the
And there's
other
pros and
plant-based,
cons to phytoestrogens as well, right?
yeah, yeah, if you're like perimenopausal, postmenopausal, it's not a bad
Bring it
thing,
in.
right? So yeah, it goes both ways, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, the other sources are so any source of plant-based protein, if you think about it, the way I like to think about it is meat-based, and plant-based proteins. And so plant-based protein is harder to digest, and obviously that's why we have a lot of fiber. You eat a lot. If you ever eat a lot of plant-based foods, and your stool is different from animal-based food, right? And so because if the protein source that we eat it from is similar to human source, and we're animals, right? Then it's easier for us to incorporate it into our body. It's very similar. We digest it similarly. We have similar amino acids and stuff, and we can utilize it all. So beans are not animal, beings, and so it takes a lot more processing power to break it down and stuff like that. And so when we talk about like plant-based food, um, the the amount of absorption is about 17% in general. Okay, give or take a few percentage in there. But we talk about like animal-based proteins, it's about 30%, right? Give or take a few 5% or so. And some of them are better than others, right? But there are a few caveats that's too as well. Not all like animal-based animal protein are equal. And what I mean by that is, for example, I don't know, it's still a big fad now. I think I call it fad, but when cholesterol was bad, still considered bad by
Yeah.
a lot of by a lot of the by a lot of the industry, sorry, the higher medical associations and whatnot, medical associations. Um, there was a product that's just like egg whites, right? And so we have like egg white sandwiches, and like you can buy egg white like milk containers, and you cook your eggs in. And you would think that that has a lot of like pure protein, right? Pure animal protein. You think that's really good for you, but it's not good for you, right? And it's similar to plant-based because only about 17% of the protein you're eating gets absorbed into your body. It gets utilized, incorporated into your tissues, etc., whatever. Right, only 17%. So that's why not every single protein is the same, because they separated from the most important part of the food, right? Which is the yolk. Yeah, the yolk contains all the minerals, all the B vitamins, even vitamin D, right? You can't get vitamin D from food sources, right? So it's unremarkable, but it needs the yolk in order to have that absorption. And having said that, though, if you eat a whole egg, it has the highest incorporation rate into our body, 30%, around
And that was
30%
one
or
of
so.
our poll questions out, was that in
Yeah,
relation to the poll question?
yeah,
So we had egg whites, we had whole egg, which you're
yeah.
commenting on right now.
Mm-hmm.
We had some other protein sources in there too. So answer to that poll question, whole egg.
Whole egg, yeah. And so what about the other things like fishes and turkeys and beef? They're very similar. I don't distinguish too much, about 30% of them. But what it is, this is where your source of protein becomes very important here, right? And what I mean by that is, fishes are probably the best next source of protein, because it contains a lot of the good fats that with omega-3 and omega-6, DHA and EPA types of food. Sorry, DHA and EPA, that the main ones in terms of essential fats that we need to help us, right? And so fish is a good source. Then obviously, you get the white meats and stuff like that. If the food, for example, poultry and the eggs that you eat are pasture raised, that is much better than farmed poultry or farmed eggs too as well, right? So the source is totally different actually. It actually, a farm egg has about 30% less nutrient. Sorry, 30% nutrient compared to a pasture raised egg. So that's the difference that you're talking about, 30-50%. So it's quite a lot. I know it definitely is a little more, but you don't need a huge amount of protein in your body to survive, right? And I think Sam has some slides into that as well. And so even that goes the same for, you know, your pork and your beef, you know. So those that are kind of grass fed is better than grain fed, obviously. And pork, you know, free range, you know, wild pork is significantly better too as well. And you know, I think I've talked about this in the past in terms of hierarchy of meat, and I'll say it again because it's so important, right? If I was to eat meat, you know, obviously eggs are always a good go-to. And, you know, I'm not afraid of how many eggs I eat. And, you know, because our body actually makes cholesterol. So if you eat about like 5 eggs a day, or about 4 eggs a day, you have about 900 milligrams of cholesterol. And that's actually more than recommended average dose, RDA, right? But the body makes about like 3,000 milligrams of cholesterol per day, you know. So and the body, you got to remember, is very good at adaptation. So what that means is that if you're eating a higher cholesterol food content, the body will shift and produce less, so you balance out. But the problem is that what we eat with it, right? So the source of cholesterol, let's say it's a good source of cholesterol, let's say it's from eggs, then it's significantly better than cholesterol from fried food, right? And so and if you're eating fried food, you might be eating other stuff like high carbohydrates with it too as well. And that changes the way we break down our food, how we utilize which food gets utilized first in the system or our body. And because we always eat an excess of amount of calories for the most part, what happens is then, you know, the rest becomes stored. And so then you get this problem of, you know, of higher cholesterol. And the data for high cholesterol, I mean, it's very controversial that, you know, before, you know, cholesterol causes heart attack. It's not. There's an association only, right? It doesn't cause. And the theory now is that it's actually inflammation that starts the cascade of plaque buildup into coronary disease, right? And then the cholesterol, all these other things makes it worse too as well, right? And so, you know, those who eat a keto style diets, you know, if you do a pure keto style diet, you'll see that, you know, your cholesterol can go up or down, LDL, HDL, and it's about a 50-50 in terms of each individual where they go, right? So it's hardest to predict, but the one thing that we can predict if you eat a low carbohydrate or very, very low carbohydrate is the amount of triglycerides that goes down. And then I can predict for you the type of cholesterol that your low density lipoprotein, what kind of a molecule it is, whether there's a dense or whether there's a fluffy one, which is a better one for you, right? So that's kind of the quick and dirty in terms of protein, in terms of the source, how important it is, and how the protein gets incorporated into our body.
Can I catch you before you head out there? You
Yeah.
were going to mention the hierarchy of proteins again. I
Yeah,
know we
what's
do it
right?
on most webinars, but if you can list out then the hierarchy of proteins.
Right. So if I had a choice, I would eat fish first. Why is because of the EPA and DHA that we get from it, the good fats that we get from it. And it's a meat source protein, so it gets incorporated a lot into our system too as well. Then it becomes poultry. It's because of the inflammatory parts of it too as well, right? Because every food is inflammatory to a degree, right? You know what I mean? People don't realize that. And then you would go to kind of the red meats too as well. So that includes your lamb, you know, veal, beef. Those are the types, and then we could go to pork. The pork is one of the worst, and the reason for that is pork has virtually no like sweat glands, right? And it's real unusual in that. And so any pesticide is fat soluble, and what I mean that is it gets incorporated into fat very easily. So if you don't have sweat glands, well, it's going to retain that too as well, right? So even if the animal you feed GMO products or products that has been used with pesticide, it's going to be incorporated into their body, right? Incorporated to their fat. And so you become what you eat. So you're going to eat the fat, you're going to get some of these products, you know, I mean, now you're hearing about microplastics in everything, in our body, in our tissues, in our coronary disease and all this stuff. We you know, we don't know the extent of plastics and pesticides and stuff like that, you know, how it's incorporated into your body. But essentially, a lot of pesticides are fat soluble. Animals get fed that, it gets incorporated to their fat. we eat it. And so, if you know that the quality of the food is a good quality food, i.e., for example, grass-fed, pastured, raised, not pasteurized, that's totally different, right? It's pasture raised, organic, certified. Okay, it has to be organic. You can say organic, but it has to be organic certified. Then you can be more certain of eating a higher fat content. And it's funny because, if you ever feel hungry, probably you're not having enough fat in your diet, not protein. Actually, it's the fat. Fat is a better satiety cue than protein. The reason why we associate the two is that most protein have lots of fat in it, right? And so that just goes to show you, fat is very essential in your foods, and so, for example, if you were to eat a lean um, protein diet. So let's say if you were a carnivore and you follow the paleo diet to a T, or you do a very strict ketogenic diet, right? And most people who do ketogenic diet, what they eat, meat, right? So it can be like salami, sausages, the worst, right? These salami sausages, the worst foods, very toxic. And so if you eat that and you're mindful, maybe the saturated fat, and you're going to eat, let's say, about maybe 15% of the meat. So I did some calculations prior. Okay, so I will remember this. So if you eat 100 grams of the product, let's say ground beef, that's 15% lean. Of that, let's say 30 of that, of that 100 grams, 30% of it will be protein, and 64% will be fat. So you're eating high fat content. And this is actually lean ground beef.
Mm-hmm.
So don't fool yourself that you're eating a high protein diet. You're actually eating a high fat diet, right? But having said that, though, it works into your favor because a ketogenic diet, a true ketogenic diet, is 80% fat diet, by the way. So, and so that's what it is, right? So that's the leanest meat. And then back to our poll question here, which food has the leanest protein to fat ratio? It's rabbit. Actually, rabbit has 2% body fat. So, so, so if you eat their meat, you have virtually no fat, but you won't feel as full. Satiety cue won't be as good as a higher fat food. So, like Wagyu beef, I love Wagyu beef. It's 30% fat, and that's why it tastes so good, so buttery, etc., etc. But you don't need a lot to feel satisfied, actually. So eating a leaner meat, you won't get as the satiety cue won't be as strong. But the caveat to that is know your source of food, meaning that if it's a good source of food in terms of grass-fed, pasture-raised, organic, if you can assure that, then you know what, you can eat a little higher fat content, and what happens is you will eat less food in general, right? So if you be mindful of the things that of your food, eating slow, 20 minutes to 30 minutes free meals, stopping when you're satisfied, not full, then you tend to have less calories in general, and it lasts longer. When you eat carbohydrates, high carbohydrates food, within 30, 60 minutes, you're hungry again. That's the problem. And you crash, you go up, then you go down. You want to replenish the carbohydrates, because that's the first thing that's utilized. It's easiest for the body to break down, incorporate into your system. Sorry. So that was the answer to the other poll question, right, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, while you're just talking about the quality of meat, I had an opportunity just to have a look around here in Guelph, because a lot of our staff don't live local, and I know our patients are. And I wanted to look where it's easy accessible for you as well. But there is a location here in Guelph called Row Farms. I know some of the patients may already use them, but GMO free, antibiotic and hormone free, preservative free. They've got a little deli where they make their own things within there as well, but organic. And that I'm aware of. These guys too, just like any other fresh box that can be delivered to your door. This is something you can do there as well, or show up to their location. But quality makes the difference. So make sure you're putting in those keywords. If you're showing up to any fresh markets in town, they'll actually have a resource. I've got this huge printout, like it's one of our old school, like an old school map you would open up in the car, and it shows me all of Wellington, where all these local farms are, whether it be for animal-based or for vegetables, but check out your local farmers. Check out your neighbor if you're out in the country, you know, if you see a farm down there, pop by, say hi, see how they take care of their animals and what you can do. So find that local spot, that local store, or ask friends or ask our community. Hop on our page. If you're on our group, go into our app and message out there, because I know we've got farmers on board. We've got folks that are out there that are doing the same thing. And another I wanted to mention about the Wagyu beef. I know it's a favorite of yours, but I've also read there that there is also less saturated fat than other beef.
Yeah,
Like it
it's
is
the
a
reason
high
for that.
fat, but it's a different fat.
Different type of fat, exactly. So the reason for that is it's grass fed versus grain fed, actually. And you see, if you actually look at the fat itself, the grain fed fat are more firm and more yellowy because they have yellow hue to it. Yeah, that's the difference. Yeah.
Look for the color. Look at it's kind of like looking at salmon and looking for the color too, making
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, salmon. Yeah, it's a if it's kind of a pinky gray, it's not a good thing. It has to be, and even the fat lines in it too as well. It tends to be thinner for salmon. That's the wild salmon, right? So
Yeah. At some point or another, I do want to pick your brain too and chat with the patients around machine modified, chemically modified meat, you know, that's not actually come from an animal, it's come from the factory or come from science.
yeah,
So
yeah.
another talk, another time, but it is just
Yeah.
interesting.
So plant-based food is taken off because of these kind of, they put together these concoctions of stuffs. A lot of it contains soy, obviously, because it's a good binder and everything.
I'm
It's a
not even
processed,
talking
bottom
about
line, it's
that
a
one, Dr.
processed
Lee.
food. What's that?
I'm going by where they're actually making a steak, like a real
Yeah,
steak, you
yeah,
know, cell generation, the crazy stuff as that goes. But that's for another time. But yeah, there's all sorts of meats out there. Know your meat.
yeah.
But yeah, I'll let you move on to your next section there.
Yeah, and so I mean, one of the things we know about protein is that we want to build muscle, right? I mean, that's important, right? I mean, muscle is the structure that gives us locomotion. It pulls the levers in our arms, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. But when you eat enough protein, you can actually cause de novo protein synthesis. What I mean de novo is just instead of exercising to cause muscle growth, by eating enough protein, you can actually start to have more protein just by having excessive protein. The reason for that is that, in the equation, the biochemistry equation to produce protein, when you have more ingredients of one, it'll just shift the equation the other way, right? And so it works out to actually 4 grams roughly of protein to create. That's a huge amount per kilogram, right? But protein induces like protein synthesis, and that's the whole point, right? Is that for us to make muscle for everything too as well, from locomotion to our muscle growth too as well, right? And there are certain amino acids that are important. That leucine is one of the big ones. That do that, and so a lot of the actually protein shakes has a higher content of leucine in there too, as well. I think Sam alluded to this. When you're older, you tend to you tend to need to eat less, and your protein consumption decreases and stuff like that. But as when you're older, you actually might need a little bit more protein, right? Because there's more degradation of protein, more turnovers and stuff like that too as well. And so your dietary changes over the years do change a little bit too, as well. And I think Sam has some information on the recommended dietary allowances of protein too as well, right?
I'm going to stick that up here while
Yeah, and even at your profession too as well. If you're a bodybuilder, if you're in that state of muscle building, you want to eat a high amount of protein, right?
Now, these are just recommendations, itself, generalized recommendations. We always recommend talking to a professional when it comes to about the amounts. Dr. Lee talked about age. There's certain things that we want to look at with the aging body as well, along with medical health. There's certain things that may stand in the way that, may not be conducive or may, turn things to the opposite direction as we get going. But daily recommended allowance when we're thinking about that is around 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight of the average adult. Now, this is talking about the average adult. You know, I've got individuals in our program that have BMIs to 30, you know, all the way in the higher 50s as we get going. And that's going to be an awful lot of protein, you know, especially if we're looking for muscle build when it's talking about 1.2 to 2 grams per kilo per body weight. I even noticed with myself not being used, you know, I eat animal protein itself. It's filling. It takes a long time to chew. It burns off a lot of energy while I do that. But noticing when I was in muscle build mode, how much I had to increase that by, it was quite difficult. You know, I'm just like a pork tenderloin here, you know, a piece of chicken. Like it was just a lot to kind of incorporate in. But, you know, to keep in mind, it's not just coming from the animal protein, you know, beans,
the best way to
legumes.
think about it is ideal body weight. And so based on your height, what your ideal body weight and your age and stuff, what your ideal body weight is, that's the easiest way to do that, right? And so, you know, like, so that's one way of looking like how much protein you need based on recommended dietary allowance, and that changes a lot. And we get to ask a lot, you know, Sam asked me, Jamie, like, you know, how much should someone eat into percentage wise of protein? So that's another way of looking at it. It's the calories, how much calories come from protein. So like if you want to eat 35% from calories of your calories come from protein, that's really tough, right? And that's actually the food guidelines that we have here recommend up to about 30% from our calories come from protein. That's really hard, you know, to eat that much. And so you definitely you know, want to eat a variety type of proteins, a variety of protein sources, so plant-based and also other sources of protein too, as well, meat.
Can I
But
show that screen? Is that
yeah,
okay?
for sure, because people don't realize the density of protein. Density is weight ratio of protein per relative to the weight, and you'd be surprised of what actually has the highest density of protein. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so I've got two screens because I've got to show the top 20 of both, but
Yeah.
this is our animal protein list. And I'm wondering if anyone's, you know, a little surprised about how many grams of protein is in 100 grams of weight of this as it goes. And I know somebody had shouted out there on one of our polls that we had that maybe chicken. Was that higher elements were on there, but I had plant-based in there and I told you it was going to be tricky. So what I think I may have put in is cottage cheese, seitan, we've got tilapia, quinoa, pumpkin seeds, we've got chicken and beef. And I think chicken was the popular one, but when we see here, it's 31 grams right now. Now, this is what Dr. Lee had mentioned before. This is what it is, but our absorbency could be slightly different. But here we are on plant-based and they look pretty good. Yes, they're lower. They are lower in a protein base compared to 100 grams. But when we're looking up here, our top winner for that one, I really had to kind of push it. I wasn't going to put soy. Soy wasn't on our list though. But it's not something as a primary resource as we're talking within there, but 75 grams. A lot of folks haven't tried seitan itself. There is a component with soy and with certain elements within there as well. But when we have a look at the list here, you know, hemp seeds high in fat too, pumpkin seeds a little bit higher in the fat, but pumpkin seed protein powder is out there to help individuals with increasing their needs as you go through, if you're plant-based or vegetarian, or you have side effects from casein or whey proteins as it goes. So don't ever disregard your plant-based that you can't get protein there. It just means you have to be a little bit more conscious of what's actually going in and aware. But we definitely can hit, you know, lentils, and we can have chickpeas and all those as you go on through. But it is easier on the animal base to grab it. But we are going to see a little bit more fats. They're in our veggies too, or over on our other side as we get going. So just wanted to share that with you. You'll get a copy of this to have at
I'm
home.
just gonna leave it with them for a second. So if you have 31 grams of protein in the chicken breast, and so if 30% of that is absorbed, so it's about obviously you know, let me do the quick math. But 9 grams of it, 9 grams, right, would be incorporated to your system. So Sam, can you go to the next slide? And so
Yeah.
if you eat 100 grams of seitan, so it'll be like 75 times 0.17. So you actually, in the same amount, you have 12.75 grams of protein that gets incorporated to your system. See the difference here? Like, even though the absorption is different, but the density of protein matters. The higher the density, obviously, you can make up for the absorption, right? And that's why I say you have to eat at least, to get that amount of protein in terms of calorie wise ratio for what the guidelines say. You have to have some plant-based protein, right? And that's why, I'm a plant-based guy for a good part. Sam knows me. I vouch that a lot just because, obviously, there's lots of other benefits to it. But that just goes to show you that proteins, you don't always have to have meat to have that protein. And so, we did a talk on like bodybuilders and building muscles, like, do we need to have meat to eat muscles? Look at cows. Cows eat grass, right?
True.
And they have that
Absolutely
high
right.
sense. Look at they're massive. We eat them for meat. But like I said, those animals, they eat plant-based, and so they have the biggest muscle mass too as well, right? So just moving forward, I know time is running out, Sam. What does, why do we want higher muscle mass? Obviously, there's so much benefits to it, from decreasing insulin resistance. If you have higher muscle mass, you're active. It's the only organ in your system that does not require insulin to bring in sugar into your body. It's a natural way of actually lowering your blood sugar. My mom's a diabetic. She's just started insulin and say, Mom, you got to just walk. And I challenged her and said, Mom, just check your sugar before and check your sugars after. And boom, it dropped by 2 points. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, that's just, that's how it is, right? And so, the higher muscle mass you have, obviously that'll help you your blood sugar regulation. The other thing is your BMR changes. The more muscle you have, the more energy you burn, the more protein you eat, the thermogenic effect of food, which is kind of the amount of calories used to process the food, is higher. So your BMR tends to be a little higher too as well. More muscle correlates with longevity. So you live longer, less osteoporosis as well, better brain health. They correlated brain atrophy. Brain atrophy is how much our brain shrinks as we get older. So the more muscle mass you have, the less brain atrophy. And brain atrophy is actually related to neurodegenerative disorders, those i.e. Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, those type of things, right? So it's good to have, like a lot of muscle mass. You tend to have less neurodegenerative disorders too as well. So, obviously, if you have more muscle mass, it can help with cardiovascular, heart function too as well. Immune function, obviously, we said that, the immunoglobulins require protein too as well. Better bone health, you're stronger, you can do a lot more things. There's just more stress to the bones. You put in more tension, torque with the muscles they're using too as well. The hormones, all hormones require a bit of protein for it too as well. So that becomes important in recovery with everything too as well, right? You need proteins to make tissue, scarring, all this kind of stuff too as well, right? So everything relies on protein pretty much.
We get a lot of talk in here around hormonal health, and a lot of the hormonal health that comes out our way is more talking about sexual function hormones versus our hunger hormones. But muscle mass itself, it helps with growth hormone and testosterone.
Growth hormone. Your muscle
helps
mass
with
human growth hormone.
hormonal regulation in that sense. So even my males out there, great. Let's get some protein. Let's actually get some muscle building on the body itself and eat some protein in its resources. But my perimenopausal, menopausal women too, it's helping with those regulations of hormones. It's not just that I'm telling you to go out and exercise and build some muscle, but it's very beneficial. And knowing that will help you engage as you get going. So lots of great reasons to have muscle and to eat protein on a variety of levels as you go. I've got a few slides here. I just want to quickly show Dr. Lee. I'm not sure if you have anything.
No, I think I said most of what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're squeezing in some time there. So ranking of protein. So I'm going to go back to the screen. I'm going to go back a few, and I just wanted to quickly talk because this actually shows up, gets asked a lot, quite often, around protein supplementation around shakes. Can I have a shake? And I talk about, well, let's try to consume it by chewing and eating it because it's beneficial to your body when we're doing that as well. But there's all sorts of different proteins available out there. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong sheet anyways, as I'm talking. Sorry, I'm looking at us there, but factors influencing protein needs. I'm going to go through this quickly there, Dr. Lee, if you don't mind. We talked about age there, activity level, different activity levels will require different protein needs. Sedentary individuals, you don't need as much to operate the body compared to physically active because they have muscle mass to keep. Your health status will make a difference. And I talked about age and health status within there before. Your composition goals. So, hey, if you're wanting to be piped up and built, you're going to have to eat and do things differently compared to you're just wanting to have a leaner look on the body. Your gender makes a difference. Praise men that can build muscle all day long easier than us females, but I'll take it. It's okay. We've got pretty bodies too. Your dietary preference and restrictions will make a difference there on your protein needs. So whether it be plant-based, animal-based, or your food allergies within there. So where I think I was going to go is right here. So whey protein comes up often, and I know over the time, Dr. Lee, I've seen in the kitchen all sorts of different protein powders on your behalf. Different things that you've cycled through or looked at or played with, but I'm just going to quickly show the differences, and if you've got anything to add within there, you've got whey protein, pros and cons here. You want to know the pros and the cons, because we get sucked right into the pros so quickly when you're in a goal and you want to, improve yourself, and we forget to look across. But some of the cons to whey is going to be I'm just going to the basics. I'm not getting to the science stuff here with you, Dr. Lee, on the con side, but lactose content, myself, lactose intolerance. It's not going to do so well for me. And I have had a few folks that, talk about some gut disruption now and then, because it's hard to process now and then. Allergy, and then processing, highly processed. Okay. We have casein protein as well. So once again, lactose element and allergy and slower absorption. So not ideal for immediate post-workout or recovery to whey protein itself. But over on the pro side, there's some good benefits. Soy protein, once again, phytoestrogens, we spoke about them briefly there. So being aware of why you would like phytoestrogens and if it fits within your means and your medical history as well. Can be a common allergen and genetically modified, as Dr. Lee had mentioned within there as well. Pea protein, so for all those who are plant-based, are doing it for a value purpose as well. Here is your plant-based protein and great resources within there, but it is an incomplete. It's still good. We can build the protein, we can get it, but it is not a fully complete protein package for you. Some of the taste and textures, some folks, it's a little green powder. Don't like it a little bit, but and there's not as much research out there as we're going on, but it is hypoallergenic. It is it can be singular, but the most singular one I found is also an incomplete protein. It is a plant-based, is pumpkin seed protein powder, singular, just protein powder, and has all sorts of micronutrients available to it as well. But I've heard, and I experienced myself with that one, that the taste is better, the texture is a little bit better as you get going. But there is different options for plant-based and the needs of what you're doing. I just needed to add those ones in there. So
I've tried all of them except for the pumpkin seed one. And just I'm always curious and stuff. And I used to do a lot of weightlifting and stuff too as well. And a lot of people know whey protein. And one thing I want to say is that it's highly processed food. By the way, what I mean, to get meat to that, the casein, and the difference between the whey and casein is that casein is actually digested very slowly, over 3 to 4 hours actually, versus protein gets absorbed in the system within 30-60 minutes and stuff like that, right? So that's why a lot of the bodybuilders drink it post exercise, and that's actually the best time to do it, is actually post exercise. The body needs recovery. Boom, you got it, it's gonna pull it in, it's gonna absorb better. And there's some studies that looked at kind of in terms of muscle hypertrophy, meaning how much growth of muscle casein versus whey protein. Casein actually has outperformed, at least some of the articles I've read, outperformed whey protein. But here's the bottom line. These whey protein, 16 to 70% only is absorbed in your body. So you're eating a real protein and meat. That's why I tell a lot of my patients. I mean, I fall in the trap too when I was younger, right? I mean, I wasn't into this field, and I used to eat protein bars all the time and all that kind of stuff. And in the gym, it's okay, I think. but not on a regular basis as a meal replacement supplement, that's not worth it. But only 16 to 7% is absorbed in your system. So that 24 grams of protein, usually the highest, that's one of the highest protein contents, like 16% of that, right, is like what, 4 grams that really gets like less than 4 grams absorbed into your system. So when you eat like a piece of chicken, might as well eat a piece of chicken. It's tastier probably. And 30% of that is absorbed into your body, right? And so that's kind of my gripe with this. It's the absorption into your system, and also how processed it is, has been bleached and all that kind of stuff. If you read how it's made, it's remarkable that we actually sell it. But it's a big market, obviously. I just want you guys to be educated on that. On the process of whey protein.
And it's not just, what's in that container itself, but what else are we adding to our shake?
Yeah.
It's usually sweet.
Yeah.
And, we're adding, it could be milk or it could be juice, or almond milk in there, but there is good healthy things. I'm hearing people put in spinach and berries and all these other things, but the balance of things kind of gets thrown out. We're hiding the good, hiding it with good as you go. So that's a little bit on the supplementation, so what you can add on there. So just keeping in mind, plant-based, animal-based is to have a variety as much as possible. So you're actually hitting different minerals and vitamins that we're getting along the way as well. When it comes down to meal planning, thinking in line of what Dr. Lee has talked about with the hierarchy, that he even takes himself in regards to animal proteins as you go. When it comes down to morning itself, your first meal, a lot of folks just get stuck into that breakfast mode. Oh, I need to have eggs, I need to have bacon, and you can have your eggs, you can have these type of things, but why not have a chickpea salad? We can have a meal itself and just kind of bring in nutrition wherever possible. But you do have, for the typical items for breakfast, you've got your Greek yogurts, your plain Greek yogurts, and you can add, your fruits or some granola to that, your homemade granola into it. You can have a chicken salad that morning as well. You can have your eggs, but plan it out and see what you can get going. Considerations, just make it clean. Try and get it from the farm wherever possible. Your Walmart or Zehrs chicken is not as good as the farmer down the street.
Yeah.
Okay. And it could be cheaper too, and fresh. That's the biggest thing. They're not injected with saline to make it look more robust. We had a local farmer here that had brought in chicken for us, and I was so amazed. Like, it tasted so amazing. He's free range chicken, but that chicken, I only had half of it. It was like the size of like a whole chicken. It was well fed, but free range, tasted beautiful. You will notice the difference. You will definitely notice the difference of how it cooks up and the flavors of that as it goes. So I hope we've learned a little bit about protein as we go, especially know that through the poll questions, we've definitely answered and debunked some of the beliefs that we may have had. And for those that are watching us later on, you can contact us with any questions that you may have. You can head over to our website at How Clinics. For those that are with us today, I'll hand out the slides that I have regards to the whey, the casein, and those type of things, and looking at your hierarchy of meats. If you don't want to read that either, go onto Google, look around, find a good resource and be curious about your foods as you pop them in. Okay. So I wish you the best on consuming your proteins in all fashions. And if you're trying to build muscle, congratulations at that, and keep at it as you go. But get back to your quality versus your quantity. And next, as I mentioned at the very beginning, our next webinar is going to be on carbohydrates. So we're hoping to do the same type of thing and see you there. I've got a really cool little experiment that I'll show you on the next one of how to grow your own little microgreens too in your own cupboard out of all things within 3 days, and amplify the nutrition as you go.
Cool.
So I'm excited for that one because it's like a little kid's craft, and I love being back in my youthful mind with that. So once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for all your support and advice. We will see you next month, and take care, guys.
Have a good night.